This is episode 132 of the Death to Tyrants podcast. Let me tell you about one of my favorite sponsors, and that is Lucky Guy Bakery. Over at luckyguybakery.com, if really delicious, all-natural, handmade brownies sound like something you'd be into, well, this is the place for you. We're coming up on the holiday season, and I know a lot of you guys won't be traveling as much, probably as you did last year. Well, the brownies and treats over at Lucky Guy Bakery are the perfect gift idea. They come in really well-designed, handmade packaging, and each order has a handwritten note, which is a really nice personal touch that they do there at Lucky Guy Bakery. I could obviously go on and on about the flavors and tastes of the brownies. The new peanut butter bonanza bar is the most amazing peanut butter cookie bar that you will ever have. That is my Death to Tyrants guarantee. For those of you wondering if they have, something for your vegan or gluten-free friends, of course they do. Such a cool bakery, handmade items, all natural brownies, no preservatives ever, so many good flavors, such great packaging, such cool gift ideas, and they love this show. Let's give them some business. So go over to luckyguybakery.com and enter promo code DTTP at checkout for 20% off your order. It's an excellent product. They're great people. Their customer service is unparalleled. So go give them some support. Let's get to the show.
The crushing weight of the tyrant's passage had left nothing unmarked.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Death to Tyrants podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Lockhart, Texas. I'm so excited to do this episode. I finally got Ilana Mercer on this show. And, you don't see her, or hear her, I should say, on a lot of podcasts these days. And it seems that there might be some podcasters in our little world that are kind of intimidated to get her on, which actually makes me like her even more. And of course, I welcome her with open arms on this show. For those of you who have written me asking me to get her on, obviously you already know you're going to love this one. For those of you who are new to the name Ilana Mercer, wait till you hear this interview. It will not take you long to love what she's got to say. And the way she says it, the way she writes, she's an extremely fierce writer. And that's actually what first turned me on to her style. Not just in her books, but her articles, everything she does, the passion for the topics that she writes about, it kind of burns in each piece. And I think once you start reading her stuff, you will agree. So let me tell you about her really quick. Ilana Mercer is a paleo-libertarian writer and theorist based in the U.S. Her acclaimed weekly column began in Canada and has been going strong since 1999. Ilana is the author of The Trump Revolution, The Donald's Creative Destruction Deconstructed, which was basically the first libertarian book shining a positive light on Donald Trump. And she wrote, of course, Into the Cannibals Pot, Lessons for America from Post-Apartheid South Africa. In her bio here, she doesn't include, but I've got to say it, Broadsides. It's a great book that I'm reading right now, kind of about her life, and it's got a lot of her great pieces in it. I will waste your time no longer. Please welcome Ilana Mercer to the show. Ilana, how are you doing, ma'am?
Hi, I'm fine, Buck. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to finally get this interview with you. I've been working at it for some time.
Oh, you've worked hard, and I'm hard to get. And I don't play hard to get. I just am hard to get.
You are hard to get, so I'm stoked.
I hope that makes it worthwhile.
Yes, I think it. Well, it already does. You're out in Washington State now, correct?
Behind enemy lines, yes.
Yeah, I'll say. It's what's the lockdown situation there like?
As you and I were just rapping a little bit, for me, lockdown, and it's not that different because you work in isolation when you, in this sort of profession. Now that we've moved off newspapers and we're in the pixelated universe, so isolation for me and working by my lonesome, which has really become quite unhealthy and loathsome, I might add. And I certainly have a message for our young listeners about the toxicity of getting wrapped up in your texts and your emails and never speaking just as you and I are speaking, like, the human voice is powerful, isn't it?
Yes,
You can
yes.
hear, it's one of our major senses. You can hear so much in it, right? So for me, not much has changed. I'm not a shopper. I don't like, unlike you asked me a question about Libertarianism Inc. Well, I'm not a consumer. I don't necessarily think I have to be out there consuming until I drop. So my husband does all the shopping, and I'm a runner. For 30 years I've been a runner. So sanity means getting out and having my run. And you're also a fitness guy, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Yeah.
I'm at the gym just about every day. I was there earlier.
Wow, I think I'm sort of aging. I don't feel as vigorous. Maybe it's just the COVID mindset. But so I try and do that. And so COVID hasn't affected me much, but I do hear we do have a lockdown now. Jay Inslee, who was voted in by 58%, I believe.
Wow.
Those who voted for him are now complaining bitterly about the lockdown and loss of business just built up. So what can I say? As I said in my last column, getting harder and harder to obey that biblical stricture, and it's in the Hebrew Bible, love thy neighbor as thyself, because all my neighbors have voted for the shutdown.
Yeah. That surprised me in this past election to see states like Michigan, and I guess not California as much because you just kind of assume they're going left. But when Michigan's had all these issues being locked down and all this loss of business and income, yet supposedly, we shall see, they vote for Biden, who wants more of that. So I don't get that. But to your point about your column, how can you love thy neighbor at some point when they keep doing things like that?
Well, I think I can not love my neighbor easier than you, because I call myself a Hebrew more than a Jew, because I'm very wedded to the Old Testament way, very biblical. But I don't have such a problem not loving them. But I do try and love them, but it's getting easier not to love them, because, on the one hand, they'll complain. They've just voted to cede all these amendments. They've just ceded the power to elect their sheriff to a bunch of, people on the council that are as good as Jenny Durkin, the woman who established the Summer of Love at Chaz or Chap.
Mm-hmm.
You cede your sovereignty, you become a subject. My neighbors have done that. These resolutions have passed, pretty much at a very high percentage, and they've also done things like instigate more police sensitivity, and we have so much on the books. It's not like, there's a lack of that. Defunding the police and police sensitivity training. A policeman only has to use his firearm in this state, and he goes on desk duty or is dismissed.
Right.
So there's more of that. They've all voted for that. They've voted to allow I think at least in King County, to allow these geniuses, these degenerates, to invest. As libertarians, we want to keep the least money out of the sticky paws of the bureaucrats and the officials, but they've voted to allow them to invest funds as they see fit, and of course that means political investment, and on and on and on, and then my neighbors complain.
Well, I want to talk about your background before we get into some of the other topics, because I think it's fascinating and it's unique for sure, especially in this political world that you and I are in, it seems like. Talk about where you're from and how you've grown over the years to develop. You've got a very finely tuned writing style and political sense. And how did you get to where you are from where you came from, and where was that place?
Well, thanks for noting, Buck. About the writing style, I think let me start with that. I think anything good and worthwhile is hard work. And this is the whole issue with our education system. It's sold to the little snot, and I think the conservatives have completely signed on onto the idea that learning has to be fun. Well, anything worth learning is not fun. It's hard work, right?
Yes.
So I've always been a gifted writer, whether it's in Hebrew. I grew up in Israel. I was very classically inclined Hebrew writer and very a good writer, and the flair was always there, the passion was always there, but I've certainly worked very hard, and I think that means reading the classics, the canon that is now banned in our school system, or pretty much, the stuff that the old white guys wrote, still the greatest writers, reading and paying attention to style. Recently, a young man, and young men are really hungry for discipline and structure and instruction. Don't you find?
Yes.
Always. They need it. And a young man actually who interviewed me about paleo-libertarianism wrote to me a la, this whole, obviously he was in very bright young man, and he had been, schooled by feminists, and he asked me about my process, my feelings, and all that stuff, and I just said, what the, can I cuss?
Yes.
What the fuck? You're a smart guy. Reformulate. Write some substantive questions, and I'll be glad to. And he returned the most brilliant questions. So young people have it in them, and they're being stymied by an anti-intellectual, postmodern impetus of the schooling system, whether it be primary, secondary, and tertiary. So young people do need the discipline, and many times when mostly young men say, how do I get the fire? I said, well, the fire you have to be born with, right? And I noticed that it's not always something that's appreciated, the thing that burns me up. Some people really get it and love it, and some people see me as an alien, and that's fine, because I think Americans don't like a radical way of expression, and surely I do burn up, I combust, right? So this young man wanted to ask, how does he get the fire? So I said, well, the fire, you could acquire your own fire if you had the tool. Like music, it's about technique, and you have to intellectually approach it by acquiring technique. So, of course, writing style, I definitely, I was an avid reader of the Times Literary Supplement Review when it was very rigorous. Now it's gone the way of the New York Times Review of Books. The worst of literature, the worst of grammar, the worst of everything. And I'm an avid reader, so I think you have to work hard at style. Passion you're born with, but together with style, you can catalyze your passion.
Yes, well put.
So that's the last portion of your question. What was the rest?
So I've actually heard you say this elsewhere. You almost got into libertarianism not realizing it was kind of what you already were. Is that the case?
Well, that's fascinating, because you also asked me about my heroes, and I'm a very anti-authoritarian. I think a lot of us libertarians are naturally, we walk away. I would go to the library in high school and I'd think, well, the bus stop is 50 meters ahead, and just keep walking, So I actually did not, I graduated tops, but I mentioned to one of your friends that a principal said to my mother, Ilana doesn't make her own rules. She has her own rules. So I've always been very anti-authoritarian, but I think the person who found me and whose style I very much admire is probably not what you're expecting, but I was writing a column in a very civilized time in Canada, where things were extremely... your listeners are going to fall off the chair now when I say that Canada was very conservative structurally, in the meta sense, in the sense that if you were a good writer, you had content, you had style, you got off the boat, you were nobody, you were not a celebrity, you got in the Financial Post, you got in the Calgary Herald, and I got into all those places and was edited by the best. So I was writing for a local newspaper, and the gentleman you will recognize wrote to me and said, do you know you are a natural praxeologist? Can you guess who said that?
It's got to be someone from the Mises Institute using that language.
Yep, someone very, very particular, someone who is an evangelist for our creed, and who's very humble, very brilliant, and fearless of talent, which makes it only one person, pretty much.
Walter Block?
Walter Block. You're brilliant, my friend. Yes. He's good. Have you interviewed him?
Not yet. He's on the list.
He's a lovely man. So he said to me, do you know that you are a natural praxeologist? And I am. That's one, I'm a priori, axiomatic, analytical, that stuff I do naturally. My anti-Semite readers say that I'm a Talmudist, but that's a compliment because I think highly of the how would one say, the gymnastics of Talmudic reasoning. It's Socratic in the best of Jewish sense. So it was Walter Block, and I said, well, what on earth is praxeology? He says, you practice it. But he said, I'll tell you if you come to a seminar with me. And that's how he recruited me. Many people say it all started with Ayn Rand, and I always say, for people sort of my age group, it all started with Walter Block.
Wow. So
he's very precision writing. He's journal articles. He's a very clear thinker. He's philosophical. He has a background in philosophy, and I'm drawn to his reasoning. So I think that his writing style and his approach to we disagree vehemently on many things, and on major things like immigration. But Walter Block is the most genial and a very brilliant thinker, and he definitely drew me in. He got me in. But he recognized what was already there.
So he was finding your writing from that you were writing up in Canada, and he was finding it down in, I believe he's in Louisiana. Is that right?
Oh, you don't know much about Walter Block. I don't think I'm divulging anything clandestine in that he also resides in Canada.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so that's how we connected.
That
and
makes
I said, well,
sense. Yeah.
I've got a bit of a thing about flying. Would you take me with? He said, of course. And he shepherded me back and forth. And we had a glorious time in Auburn. Yeah.
And
that was 20 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. Do you guys still keep in contact?
Yes. I don't see him as often as I'd like. But an occasional email, definitely, yes. And he gave me a wonderful, wonderful review on LinkedIn.
Really cool. Okay. Well, paleo-libertarianism is something that, with this show, I'm actually trying to expand the knowledge about, because it was kind of a niche market in the 90s, and then it kind of disappeared. And I think it's reappearing a bit, and people like you help that, obviously. And I'm trying to get the audience to understand, how do you describe paleo-libertarianism? And just to make sure, I assume that you still would say that that's the camp you fall into?
Absolutely. My column, even in the Junge Freiheit, when I wrote for them, was they titled it in German, the Paleo-Libertarian column, the RT, when when my Russian spying days.
Right, of course.
Can I say that without being... my Russian spying days, when I had a column in RT, they titled it volitionally the Paleo-Libertarian column, and it's the same on World Net Daily. So I think Lou Rockwell coined the term, I believe, and I always doff a hat to people who went before, unlike people who don't doff a hat to me. And I've always been very consistent on certain foundational principles, and have justified them on the basic of libertarian principles, which means the non-aggression axiom. That's the foundation. And the person who best explains the non-aggression axiom and the bare essence, because it's really a skeleton upon which you build, is Walter Block. Certainly, he's the clearest thinker on thinking and explaining what the non-aggression axiom is. So my principle, can't think that I've changed on any matter, be it on immigration, be it on avoiding the more complicated issues for me, or avoiding economic reductionism, which I think this is where I came into conflict with many libertarians who saw me as maybe anti-business or anti-outsourcing or critical of corporate America, always have been. This family is is a techie family, and we certainly survive on the avails of, well, they survive on our blood. They leech us dry. But anyhow, so you want to know how I, for myself, define paleo-libertarian?
Yeah.
It's very simple, and it's the way I define it for myself. It's someone who understands that liberty is not a denuded axiom. It's not a proposition. It has a civilizational dimension. In other words, the axiom of non-aggression is cultural, it's historical, and in certain climes it will die and not survive.
That's right.
Simple.
Yep.
And my difference with most libertarians, establishment libertarians, and many even more conservative libertarians, is that they believe that the quest of human nature is towards take away the state, which I call a form of social determinism. When you say the state made me do it, no. If you're a self-propelled if you believe in human agency and self-determinism, you don't go on about how, you'll take away the state, human nature will thrive. Well, no. Okay? No. Not going to happen.
Right. One of the ways I kind of look and separate what I would call right libertarianism versus left libertarianism is hierarchy and a belief in hierarchy versus egalitarianism. And I assume I know this answer, but could you elaborate on where you would fall on that topic?
Oh, absolutely. And it ties into a very interesting question you asked me when we were discussing this interview. You wanted to ask what the modern left means to me.
Yes.
And that's precisely what it means. It means the demise of ordered liberty, of hierarchy, and of a certain very important stratification. Yes, some people are better than others.
Yes.
Absolutely. Am I a natural elitist? Yes, as Thomas Jefferson was. I'm not an institutional elitist, which is what the overlords we live under, we labor under, right?
Right.
But I'm a believer in a natural aristocracy, for sure. So hierarchy is absolutely essential, whether it's in family, in society, and that's what the progressive left represents. One of the things it represents, other than the destruction of everything that is foundational and beautiful, goodness, mental and intellectual rigor, language, the beauty of language. Even the idea that science to them is purely an empirical endeavor rather than a philosophical and an analytical endeavor. What else do they kill? They kill kindness, love, history, memory, monuments, everything. So one of the important things, as you say, is hierarchy. Absolutely.
I want to talk about Into the Cannibals Pot because it seems like the book you're most famous for at this point, and it also seems to give a warning to America. Can you talk about that and the general thesis of that book?
You promised not to ask for disquisitions. Rephrase.
Yeah, that's true. Let me see how.
I'm kidding you.
Are you messing with me already?
I'm messing you. I'll just answer succinctly. First of all, Cannibal was written in 2011, and nobody would touch it. Well, none of my books were published. Thank God for Amazon. What happens if they ban us? I mean, if they start burning books on Amazon,
right?
I don't want to even give them ideas. You might as well cut this out.
Okay.
Don't give the idiots ideas, the useless idiots. But Cannibal was refused publication by conservatives, by libertarians, by everybody. And every single column that I've ever written about South Africa since 2011 has been a cut and paste job from Cannibal. It is it's pretty prophetic, and all it is an analytical look at South Africa, at apartheid. And of course it has lessons, but I'm afraid it's a little too late. And I think this year we see that it might be too late after this election. Basically I've always emphasized the top-down, centrally planned creation of a dominant party state, which is essentially what happened in South Africa. I'm not saying that the apartheid state was not centrally planned, but it was replaced, but with a similar configuration, or at least dispensation, whereby you entrenched a permanent majority based, driven along racial lines, and you designated a minority to the political bleachers, I would say, forever. And in the case of the white minority at the tip of Africa, as we've learned from very, very many other countries like that, to possible ethnocide. And that's something we have to take seriously, very seriously here.
Yeah.
And nobody has. You know, even the conservatives, and I like to extend it to the way conservatives approach the distinctly anti-white impetus of American politics. We call it all kinds of things. We call it communism. Well, you know, I'm extremely... You asked about my no-holds-bar take on things. It's nothing like that at all. I just look at things and see a truth that I see. You might disagree with it, but when I look at our politics, I don't see identity politics. I don't see Hispanics being sicked on Native Americans or blacks being sicked on Asians. I see all of them piling on whites. And so that's what I see. That's the analytical vision that I get from where I'm perched. And I'm not calling it in a heroic or brave. I'm just calling the truth.
Right.
I don't see communism in critical race theory. I see anti-white agitprop. So these are things that I was warning in Cannibal about top-down, centrally planned societies where you have an imperfect dispensation, political dispensation, as we had when I was growing up in South Africa, and where you come and you change it overnight and you cause this catastrophe. I think that that's something that I've been emphasizing for many years, since 2011, which makes it almost a decade since I wrote that book. I would also shift somewhat. There's a chapter in Cannibal, The Anglo-American Axis of Evil. And I think it's very important because what you're seeing on the streets of the U.S., what you're seeing coming out of the academy, what you're seeing inculcated in the schooling system, what you're seeing conservatives trying to separate themselves from when they say Antifa, Antifa. No, the research is irrefutable. There is no separate Antifa. Antifa is us, Buck.
Mm-hmm.
These are kids from the suburbs, a lot of them white.
Yes.
Maybe a majority of them white. Okay, Soros, money there and here. But this is us. This is what American society is becoming. There's 72 million good people, and the rest is this. Yeah, so...
I remember reading that point, that quit pretending Antifa is this faraway group that just invades city to city here and there. It's us.
It's us, and that idiot, what's her name, the South African woman on Spock, who looks like one of those MMM fighters. What do you call them?
MMA?
Yeah, MMA fighters. I think it's all the Botox.
Oh,
I'm being a bit Lara Logan. Yes, she's never covered she's Afrikaner, I believe, or she's never covered the ethnic side of the rural and white minority in South Africa. But she was big on the Antifa. We found bricks in a dumpster. Yeah. Well, no, I think I've looked at the records, and it's, of course, I immediately saw the analytical truth, and I immediately called it. But then I went and checked. You know, I've become quite predictive, so I trust my truth. But then I go and check all the records, and I saw the AP report, and I saw the police reports. 90% of these people are coming from us. Mm-hmm. Chatham Chairs is courtesy of Washington State. It's not. Besides, if you are Antifa, why are you moving state in order to destroy another state?
Right.
Why not destroy your own state?
Yeah.
Nothing makes sense with the way conservatives erect these defense mechanisms so as to ward off the truth that this is us, and the truth about America's profound anti-white, pervasive, dangerously pervasive politics. And so back to the Anglo-American axis of evil, there is a chapter also in Cannibal where I emphasize there that all the toxic ideology foisted on South Africa, whether it's centralizing that political dispensation whereby so many of the seminal thinkers that were South Africans, like Van Zyl Robert, who's passed, and Buthelezi, a Zulu prince. They were all sophisticated, classical, liberal thinkers, and they all thought about the Canton Swiss political system. They thought of federalism and, devolution to provinces. In came America and centralized everything for them and forced all these toxic affirmative action and anti-whiteness and all this. This comes from us. This comes from England as well, but not even so much from England because they never heard of Black Lives Matter until, the immigrants that began rioting in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a hell of a lot of truth that I'd like to your listeners to look at the Anglo-American axis of evil and to really look at what America is doing in terms of exporting intervention in others' elections, exporting the toxic ideas of raw right democracy without devolution of power to provinces and to localities, all the things that our founders preached against.
I want to tell you guys about a great sponsor of the Death to Tyrants podcast, and that is our friends over at Zippix Toothpicks. These are flavored toothpicks. They've got several great flavors. Check these out: cinnamon, clove, mocha, and whiskey even. But not only that, each toothpick actually contains nicotine, and I use these toothpicks all of the time. Not only are they a great alternative to that nasty habit you may be trying to stop, and that includes vaping, come on now, but they taste great. They are way more socially acceptable. They are cheaper than any alternative. Hell, I don't even dip or smoke or anything like that, and I still love these Zippix toothpicks. Out of all the alternatives on the market, these are the most cost-effective, and better yet, they are a sponsor of this show. When a small business is out there helping to support one of your favorite Liberty podcasts like this one, let's thank them by returning the support. Since you are a loyal listener to the Death to Tyrants podcast, you will get 10% off of your order by entering promo code DTTP at checkout when you order over at zippixtoothpicks.com. Once again, go to zippixtoothpicks.com, that's ZIPPIX, toothpicks.com, and type in promo code DTTP for Death to Tyrants podcast at checkout, and you will get 10% off of your order, and you will be supporting Zippix and Death to Tyrants at the same time. So go do it. Let's get back to the show. You said something brilliant. Well, you said a lot brilliant, but something that stood out in that last answer was it's almost like a defense mechanism that conservatives use. One of the things I often note is that part of why I think conservatism has been neutered so harshly is that they always play on the field that the left designs.
Exactly.
It seems like the left makes the rules and the conservatives try to fight them within this strange structure that's been created rather than kind of busting through it. Does that make sense?
That's actually also brilliant, my friend. It's absolutely true. If you distill to the building blocks of what conservatives are just so malleable, they're almost like they just move into that. They play on the leftist field, and they never stick to their guns. And you know what? The progressive left they're cowards. And that's the problem with Trump as well, because when he came in there, had he put up serious people, and I think you read my book about Trump.
Yes.
The Donald's Creative Destruction Deconstructed.
Yes.
I put up a whole list of people that would have to go up there every day, not the pretty ladies that he has there now, but people like Pat Buchanan, heavy hitters who could explain the philosophy. And when you hammer the left, they so many times rolled over when Trump really got out there and hammered them. It is when you actually cede ground to them that they become, they bullies. That's what a bully does. When you cede ground, they climb in. And you're absolutely right. The conservatives just move into the liberal turf, and you see it how so many are migrating to MSNBC and CNN. You see the whole Lincoln Project.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really, in the grand scheme of things, they are nobody. They are up against 72 million Americans who have adopted the Trump, maybe too much as like ditto heads, but it's a good swing, right? It's a good swing.
Right.
It's a good swing towards, away from Big Con as Jack Kerwick, whom you also must interview.
Yes.
You must interview Jack Kerwick. Towards the big swing away from Big Con, a big swing away from neoconservatism. And I think the population, the people behind Trump have made that swing, and that's the genius of Trump. It's in the process.
Yes, no doubt about it. And it's funny to see kind of we're seeing the split right now within Republicanism, I guess you could call it, where a lot of them think, well, I think he's lost this. And you see who really had his back right now versus the ones that are going to, kind of go with whoever's next. But like you said, there's 72 million people that love him, and they're still going to be there. And I want to read something, one of my favorite parts of the Trump revolution, and I think it was kind of a giant key point in the book, is that you write this: in the age of unconstitutional government, Democratic and Republican, the best liberty lovers can look to is action and counteraction, force and counterforce in the service of liberty. I want to ask you about that line because there's been pushback from mainstream libertarians against libertarians that said, I got to vote for Trump this time because he's at least a wrecking ball and he's wrecking or wanted to wreck the things that we hate. And his enemies are our enemies. I want to ask you about that particular line in the book. And also, did you get pushback from libertarians for writing this book?
Oh, I'm libertarianism's dirty little secret. I went on, sometimes I would just, look at some podcasts even that you are familiar with and hear that line appropriated because they think they can keep me as their dirty little secret.
Oh.
But I'm afraid libertarians don't create talent with their obsolete magazines and websites. They are honored to reflect it. And to the extent they don't reflect the thinkers and the leaders in their field, to that extent they consign themselves to a third dimension. Homer Simpson's third dimension. You picked up, I actually heard someone repeat that as his own. It is exactly Trump. It encapsulates that book and why the Trump revolution, the Donald's creative destruction deconstructed, has longevity because it emphasizes that process of Trump. Not so much the policies, although there were many that were good, or even the person whom I actually liked because he is fearless.
Mm-hmm.
If I were Trump, I would be curled up in the corner, shaking. COVID didn't get him, nothing gets him. That, and you even saw Michael Smukonis on CNN. His eyes, before the election, his eyes lit up. He was being interviewed by one of those dim females, or was it Wolf Blitzer? I can't recall. And he was being asked about Trump and the usual. It's all a gossip show. There's no news. They don't do reportage. They just do female, they tattle. It's female gossip.
Right. Yep.
So he was and his eyes lit up, and he said, "You've got to give this guy. Look at his energy." He was out on the campaign trail. He was giving these rallies. There was this, you asked about parrot. My parrot hears Trump, a Trump rally. He flies to his chair in the dining room. He sits on the chair and he just ogles him. He loves him.
Really? Your parrot does that?
My parrot does that. And then he says to me when I come and say, "Hey, Oscar, what are you doing?" He says, he sort of just looks at me and says, "Leave me. Can't you see I'm busy watching?" And then he sort of does this display of his wings like respect.
Wow.
He adores Trump. He just senses that, that manly force in full tilt, that unstoppable thing that the media just couldn't take.
Yeah.
The girly distaff media couldn't take. So you alighted on the exact, the impetus in this book, action, counteraction, force and counterforce, in the services, at least, if not liberty, blowing the lid off a very illiberal system, and that's what he's done.
Yes.
And of late, he's done that with democracy, because, you and I don't like democracy.
Right.
The founders didn't think democracy was workable. beyond the Athenius polis, or maybe, I don't know, Monaco, or a very homogeneous Estonia. I don't know. You have a small 1 million people. That's
Right.
where democracy works. So he blew the lid off it, whether he wants it or not. It's the process of Trump. It's what he achieves, and he just, for the deep state, it was just, by the way, the deep state is not a conspiratorial term.
Right.
It was I first heard it on the PBS by Bill Moyer.
Really?
Yes. And he interviewed someone from the military-industrial complex who spoke about the deep state and Eisenhower's objections to military-industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
So this doesn't come, because we're so illiterate. We don't trace things properly, but if we repeated these truths, the deep state is not a matter of conspiracy. It's a term, I would say, that in permutations, I call it the James Burnham's managerial state.
Yes. Yes.
That. So it's a very respectable term used by the left as well. And so he just blew the lid off it, and like Samson, and I think I was the first one to. This is the first book of libertarian take on Trump, which was published in June 2016, a month before the wonderful Ann Coulter's book.
Uh-huh.
And so I was the first to use the analogy, which comes from, of course, the Hebrew Testament, which I love, and that's of Samson, just bringing the house down on this house of iniquity, and bringing it down on its putrid patrons. That's what he's done.
Well, one of the problems I have with, I guess we can call it Libertarianism, Inc., certainly the Libertarian Party, the messaging is antiquated. And they're still trying to do this thing where they say, oh, don't waste your vote on the Republicans and Democrats. They're all the same, pretending like it's 2008 when it's McCain versus Obama, or 2012 with Mitt Romney. And they failed to see and basically progress through the last 4 years where things have changed so much that to pretend the Democrats are the same as the Republicans when you're talking about Donald Trump and Joe Biden is just a blue-pilled idiot mentality, to be quite honest. And I want to ask you, in your own words, what does this last presidential election, what would you say it represented? Because to me, it's not just, let me go down the line and see whose policy is what and how that compares to the libertarian candidate. It was about a lot more than policy.
Buck, just return me to that question if I get off on a tangent. But I do want to address the obsoleteness of what I call light libertarianism. You did ask me what are my thoughts about Libertarianism, Inc., or I call them light libertarianism. Well,
Yes.
I don't have any thoughts about them. I don't think about them.
I love it.
But to the extent I do, I think there are so many. You're talking about conservatives, a certain type of republicanism that's obsolete, but there's also a certain type of libertarianism that we are clinging to that needs to be rethought, wouldn't you say?
Yes, thank you.
For example, I mean, since day one, I've been very much in conflict over economic gigantism that we support.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why on earth this elephantiasis almost? This aberration of a corporation. Why
Yes.
do we adulate it? Why a paleo-libertarian has to want to see a corporation tethered to the community?
Yes.
Yes, you expand, but sometimes it's greed when you expand so much that it becomes pure gigantism, what I call economic gigantism. So back to the definition of paleo, I would very much be against this economic reductionism that anything the corporate world does. And our family is deep in the bells. Thankfully, no longer. Thankfully, my spouse is now a free man. And those were I mean, he's brilliant. And, people might often say to me, you came here on a visa, why are you objecting to visa? No, he came here on a genius visa. A visa that that was reserved for a few hundred across the world. And you could get this those are capitalists.
Mm-hmm.
Those are capitalists. The O1 is capitalist. You could bring in the best people on that visa. You don't have to replace good tech jobs that are not for that, I hate to say the word IQ, but let's say people with unique abilities.
Yes.
So, and I've seen, he comes from a position of power, but I've seen how they destroy family, they destroy, if you're a white male, you don't have a very good, enjoyable experience in a corporation. I always say that when Microsoft grows up, it wants to be government.
Yes.
But,
Wow.
but it's grown up, and it's a good competition for government, and it enforces critical race even worse.
Yes.
And it humiliates people of faith even worse, and it traps them. They can do the best of work because it works very much. The corporate culture works very much like I would liken it to an oil state. Do you see where I'm going with this, Buck? You do. An oil state that has unlimited funds,
Mm-hmm.
like a sheikdom.
Right.
A sheikdom has unlimited funds because they have billions and billions to waste. For instance, the Connect, this was within the news. They let a lady run with it because she was a female with no gifts, no talents, but they had the billions to lose, right?
Right.
So this is how corporate, the simple idea of profit, and they will always want to please the customer. They have to ship, they have to use the cheapest labor. It's wonderful that we're polluting, we're spewing cadmium into Chinese rivers. It's great. Outsourcing that. We're not doing it on our shores. All the stuff that goes into cell phones, consumption, commerce. Libertarians also have to rethink a lot about the corporate culture we have so much supported.
Yes.
In terms of this free speech issue, I guess the classic argument is that it's private property.
Yes.
But it isn't private property. It's not. It doesn't work like private property. Twitter and where I've just sent a check off to a friend who can't transact on PayPal. Where's the civil rights law?
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know. If you refuse to bake a cake and then you're big on baking and selling cakes,
right.
that's your side thing there. If you refuse to bake a cake for someone, but you're a goner, right?
Yes.
So why can PayPal refuse to allow people to make a living, to transact when they are not criminals? They've done nothing against the law except spoken into the ether words that some people don't like.
Yes.
So I think we too have to rethink a lot of what it means to be libertarians. And coming back to the like libertarians, they haven't done that thinking, have they?
No. And Jeff Deist always says the worst libertarians are ignorant on economics and ignorant on history. And I think we're seeing that come home to roost. That's almost like I said, how conservatives want to play on the left's field when they try to fight. Mm-hmm. The libertarians just want to play on any field that the major two parties will give them. And they kind of bow down. And it's embarrassing, to be quite honest, which on this show, I'm trying to feature some more enlightened voices in our world, which is why I got you on here. And I also
I really do. Sorry, Buck. I really do recommend you get for the freshest paleo-conservative. I would say Jack Kerwick is the freshest, most inspired warrior type stance that would appeal to your younger audience, because they are sick of this.
Yes.
Oh, vote Republican. That'll get you somewhere. They are sick of that lie. Voting Republican gets you nothing. In fact, speaking of voting Republican, but do get Jack Kerwick on, because he is really burning up as much as I am burning up. And he has a very interesting perspective counter to moving into the left field as the Republicans do, and a more creative critique of Con Inc. and the big con, as he calls it. It's become sort of a tired, hackneyed approach on our side, on our paleo side. We're always talking about the big con. Well, you know what, Buck, the people that have published me for 20 years, you could call them big con. They publish a very radical column. My column is very radical.
Mm-hmm.
I can't look to our coven for publication. I've never been published regularly by the people to whom I'm affiliated ideologically and philosophically. So it is a very complicated issue just to say, oh, what do you think about the big con, without being a cliche.
Right.
It's becoming a cliche. Everybody's talking about the big con. Fine. Well, they publish me, and some of them are courageous. And when I look at, let's say, even the people that have never looked at someone so radical as is my column, I see them talking and walking the Trump walk. Yes, there's an establishment that's not doing it. There are politicians so stupid that I've it's hard to actually quantify such stupidity. Today I saw a gentleman, and please get me back on topic. I know I'm enjoying myself with you here and just speaking off the cuff. I saw a gentleman who's probably just elected being interviewed on Fox and Friends, maybe very early in the morning, and he was saying we have to actually begin negotiating about the fact that the police is not protecting conservatives.
Mm.
Now, what is your response to that? To me, the police has a constitutional duty to uphold the law.
Mm-hmm.
There is no negotiating. If they're not doing that, that's treason. You drop that person off to jail if you do not protect a conservative who is being bashed by a liberal.
Mm-hmm.
You don't cede the basics of law and order or ordered liberty, as is the appropriate term, to a governor or to a state. If natural rights are being violated, someone must uphold them. I don't care what level of this so-called broken federal scheme that we labor under. And that's another thing maybe we shouldn't be so wedded to. Oh, the states are law and order. Let Chat and Saz and all these anarchists, these vicious little pockets of little, tyrannical fiefdoms where normal people are, brutalized.
Mm-hmm.
If their natural rights are not being upheld, if my natural rights are not being upheld, they need to be upheld.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we do not live in a constitutional republic. And Republicans are incapable of reiterating that simple concept, that constitutional concept, the thing that I believe, policemen sign up to do. Don't they swear some oath to do that?
Yes. Yeah.
They don't swear, oh, I will stand down if conservative is being bashed.
Right.
So here you have the conservatives you've spoken about moving into the left field and speaking about coming to a negotiated solution with the police and with the left about giving some protection, life, liberty, and property, to the life, liberty, and property of conservatives. That, to me, is treason. That person needs to go away.
Yes, no kidding. God, it's
disappear.
Yeah, thank you. Agreed. Why do you think some of your stuff gets, I don't know, could we call it censored? Have you had issues on Facebook and other platforms where all of a sudden, I don't know, is it maybe the term, some of your stuff is throttled?
Oh boy, where do I start? That's why I asked you if you could please ask your listeners to, pay attention to the social media where I am throttled on Twitter. I cannot acquire any more followers because as soon as I do, the algorithm kicks in and begins to throttle it back and cut back and cut back. I'm shadow banned, and that has been confirmed through you can plug in your URL to various websites, and they will tell you your URL. My hashtags go nowhere, so it's very hard. I mean, I think and I would love to reach out to the left because being versatile, I'm not being a paleo-libertarian. In many cases, my thinking is attractive to the left.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, on the environment, right? Major reckoning there, but that's for another program. But I can't reach out to anyone because I'm throttled. And then the same scummy, lowbrow Facebook, I just call them Facebook, but they have banned any URL originating from my website and my blog. The same thing for Un's Review where my column appears. But I can post my columns because my columns, thankfully, appear on what you would call the big column.
Okay.
Less WorldNet Daily, because WorldNet Daily is neoconservative, conservative, evangelical, a lot of things. Everything libertarians would probably shun, right?
Yeah.
These people have stuck by my column for 20 years.
Wow.
Do you know how many columns they've pulled of mine?
How many?
Just guess.
I hope none.
No. I mean, look, some of them,
They'll pull some.
look, you're talking about our camp that has not published any of my regular weekly columns.
Right.
Occasionally one here, one there. None. And you're talking about WorldNet Daily that has published me thousands. At least, I don't know how many over, 20 years. Every column. They pulled 4 columns over 20 years.
Wow. Well, that's pretty damn good.
Those people are committed to free speech.
Yes.
They don't censor anything. I mean, if I swear, and I think some words should be used honestly. I mean, D.H. Lawrence used the word I just used in a very elevated tract, I think. What is Lady Chatterley, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lady Chatterley's lover. That's a good, honest word. So that they'll put the little, bashful Christian hyphens in some words, but they don't censor. So Big Con is a complicated amalgam. I think a lot of it is moved, a huge swathe of it is moved towards Trumpian thinking. Not enough fight, of course, not enough fight. As you say, they always fight like girls.
Yeah.
They fight like girls, and and that's about it. So that's what I can say. I mean, I have to be honest. I think our tribe is self-cannibalizing. A lot of us are certainly atrophying ethics and God for theoretical purity. I consider myself very pure. I just move, not with the times, but I move with reality.
Yes. Yeah.
Reality is the ultimate adjudicator of truth.
Yes.
And as one very precious reader said to me, I'll shout out to him, hi Ken, he'll like that. He said to me, we've learned to trust you. And so to the extent that your work is predictive, to that extent, it's theoretically pure, right?
Right.
Because there's no higher thing than reality.
Hey guys, let's take a minute to talk about one of our sponsors, and that is Lorenzotti Coffee. I love these guys, not just because they were our very first sponsor, but because, like I've said many times, their coffee is so damn good. If you guys like coffee that tastes the way coffee is actually supposed to taste, with natural flavors that come from the region and the roast of the beans, rather than from artificial flavorings like some other brands use, well, then you'll love Lorenzotti Coffee. If you're a real coffee drinker like myself, you don't want these weird flavors in your coffee like key lime pie or blueberry muffin. You want strong, traditional flavors that actually come from the beans themselves, and that's exactly what you get with Lorenzotti Coffee. You can get Lorenzotti's signature Venetian blend. The stuff comes right from Italy, okay? You can do whole beans, medium fine grind, which that one's actually perfect to use in the French press like I prefer. It comes in these really cool, beautifully designed, resealable tins that ship to you, hermetically sealed, and keep the coffee very, very fresh. Guys, I cannot speak highly enough of Lorenzotti. They're lovers of liberty. They love this show. They support this show. So why not support them by getting yourself some damn good coffee? So go to lorenzotti.coffee. That is LORENZOTTI.coffee. Guess what? We got a promo code, and that, as you know, is DTTP for Death to Tyrants Podcast. You'll get 10% off your order at checkout. Again, that's lorenzotti.coffee. Enter code DTTP at checkout. Let's get back to the show. Where do you see this mess going that we're living through right now with the challenges in court? And I assume you probably saw part of that press conference yesterday. I watch it and I keep seeing Sidney Powell speak. And I think if what she says is true, I mean, this is going to be the biggest story in the history of this country, probably. And then you start thinking, well, what are you going to do? Hurry up. Like, there's only a short amount of time. And if it's not true, they've lost all credibility. Do you have any thoughts on what this election, all the shenanigans behind the scenes, and apparently what they've got signed affidavits and sworn testimony that had happened? What do you think we're going to see?
I didn't watch that. I did watch Tucker, who said that he didn't get anything concrete from her. But I'm not sure if he has. And I'm not mired down in the technicalities of election fraud. I wrote a column, which, by the way, is on townhall.com, not on any of the other paleo websites. The last time they had a column on a paleo website was when Richard Spencer, in his libertarian days, bless him, recruited me for Tucky's, and then promptly we were all fired by, I guess, Tucky's family or something. But anyhow, that's the last time. But anyhow, I have a column. It's on Town Hall, and it's about the simplest election fraud that is baked into the system, and that's you don't have to be a citizen to vote. You don't have to offer proof.
Yes.
So that's pretty much all you need to know about the election system that the progressive left has achieved. You need a driver's license. That's not proof of citizenship. And what else? Driver's license.
I think that's it.
I think that's it. So you don't need proof of citizenship to vote in most. It's basically the honor system. And John Fund has done extensive research. He's quite a solid former Wall Street Journal journalist who does good shoe leather work. And he's shown pretty much that voting, I don't know if it's certainly now it sounds rigged, but basically you don't have to be a citizen to vote. So basically the world can vote with a driver's license. So that's something that I've highlighted very simply. So without going into the complexities of what they found now, and I've actually asked my husband as a tech, he said, well, those things are very doable. The change, those are very simple. That's simple programming and all that. That's doable. That can be done. I don't know. I can't answer you. But what I think that Trump has achieved, do we want? How do I phrase it and not turn people off? People were very upset at the column before last that I wrote about Trump going beast mode. That now we will see the dissident Trump rising.
Yes.
And once again, I'm emphasizing a process mode, a process oriented, aspect of Trump, not a policy.
Right.
I see a lot of secession happening. I see us going to parlor because, look, seceding out of the school system. Maybe I think it's very important to get together in communities. I really feel now that we're so isolated, even territorial secession plans are a good thing, especially for young people where you're building families. You want to be in a loving community where you can speak to your neighbors. You do want some forms of informal secession. I think a bunch of African Americans have bought a huge plot of land and are going to try and make a go of it.
Yeah.
I wish them luck. We support secession, right?
Yes.
And so I think we can look. People were very upset that I wasn't going to go in there and fight, 72 versus 73 million, this and that. It basically does highlight the horribleness of democracy, pure, ripe, raw democracy, effective democracy, whereby all powers are centralized and where 78 million people can lord it over. Yep. I don't know if the 72 is true or not, but let's say, for the point of argument, 72 who voted, and they can lord it over those who have not voted. So it really highlights the idiocy of democracy, and I think that for me was a chance to highlight that the center cannot hold, as that Yeats, was it Yeats?
Yes.
The center cannot hold. Secession is loosed upon the world, or whatever, something like that.
Yeah.
Sort of I bastardized the words, and I'm doing that now. But for us, it's not a bad message. People were upset with it because Republicans and Trumpsters still want us to fight and us to lord it over them. It's a difficult dilemma for libertarians who don't like democracy.
Right.
True libertarians.
I know.
Who despise democracy.
Right.
So that's certainly what I've emphasized. I haven't looked into the details of voter fraud. I have no problem believing that. given the fact that it's baked into the system. You don't need
Right.
citizenship
Yes.
to vote. And by the way, I did citizenship. Trump was the inspiration for me. Typical, more radical libertarian, I was not going to become a citizen. I was a permanent resident. And I naturalized because of Trump.
That's right. You say that in the book, I
Yeah.
believe.
No, I said that in the first time I've ever divulged that was in my column before last.
Okay.
Trump goes beast.
That's,
Trump goes beast.
there you
mode.
go. Okay. That's where I read it then.
Yeah, and I dragged my poor husband to naturalize because he inspired me. And Trump got me to naturalize. And I do begrudge the fact that we gave him the presidency and the two chambers, the upper and lower chamber. And we have to admit that, not enough was done, especially to someone like me and to you, because I can come after you, to people like us who make a living or a very meager living, or at least have to be out there speaking our minds.
Yeah.
And I consider myself to be a highbrow writer. I am not a racist. I don't write crass racism. I consider it impolite to tell someone they have a lower IQ. It's horrible. You know what I'm saying? I'm a strident writer, and I think maybe even a fiery and exciting writer,
Yes.
but I'm not a rude racialist writer. And here they go banning me.
Right.
So I think that the opportunity to do something against the corporations, so many libertarians in power, laud and want to protect their right to kick us off and kick us to the curb.
Yeah.
You and I are unable to sue, and 230, repealing 230 will enable that.
Yeah.
But you and I can't sue, and you know that Con Inc. is not going to help us.
Right.
Candace Owens can sue.
Yeah.
I can't sue them. I think Richard Spencer, and people are going to fault me for I still think of him as a libertarian. Sorry, I refuse to address the rest. Call me a throwback. Maybe
You're old
I'm
school.
in denial. But he said, make it a free speech zone. That's it.
Yeah.
Force them to make it a free speech zone because they enter private property. They are subsidized.
Yes,
to the
that's
hill.
the point right there. They are subsidized. It's not some small private corporation or corporate business, or it's not some guy that just owns this little business that we are treading on. This is giant mega corporations. Some people would say arms of the CIA and deep state, and certainly lots of funds.
I call them deep tech.
Yeah.
Deep tech, and I saw that one of my columns that was edited out. I don't know why. They are
Really?
deep tech. They are deep tech. I don't know why. I like it, and it's I coined it. Damn straight.
Deep tech. I like that. Did you say
Deep
that was
tech.
edited out of one of your columns?
Yeah, big tech rather than deep tech. I think deep tech is appropriate and it's original and it's nice. But
Yeah.
yes, and they operate with a grant of government privilege.
Oh, yes. No doubt.
They are the state's bitches, and they are the administrative state's bitches, and they are the enemies of the people, and they will be the enemies of the left as well, as Glenn Greenwald
Yes.
has
Yes.
shown so well, and how they have not stood up for Assange or for Snowden or for people like that.
Right. Yep.
These are very bad people. They are arrogant people, and believe me, I am quite enmeshed in the tech culture of these people who live in rarefied, very ignorant and arrogant. These are not good people. They're not good people.
Well, let's talk about good people then. My listeners, a lot of them I know for a fact are fans of yours. I guess I want to ask here towards the end, let's see, what advice, I guess, would you give people that are listening that want to hear what you have to say? If you want to talk about political advice, philosophical advice, anything that you would like to put onto the ears of my listeners.
Well, thanks. I really do appreciate that opportunity, and because we're living in such painful times. And, is it true to say, and I'll ask you this, are most of your listeners young men?
That's funny. I've been asked that a lot lately. Here's what I'll say. I don't know the exact demographics. It's more female than a lot of libertarian podcasts, but
Wonderful.
But again, it's a libertarian, themed, I should say, podcast. But I'm going to guess it's probably 80% male.
But then you've made strides. You've made huge strides. So I love my ladies, because every lady that comes to me I treasure. And of course, recently it's been wonderful for me to see the enormous talent of our friend Rebecca Diligent.
Yes.
Enormous. She's written a track that people can go to my blog, because I append to it that wonderful song, horrible backings, and I'm a music elitist. Horrible backings for that wonderful song by Alicia Keys, That Girl Is on Fire.
Mm-hmm.
Our girl is on fire. She's a young lady that I'm honored to be called a mentor of. And I love it when young people do turn to me and want some comfort, because I need comfort. And it's very hard working in isolation. And for me to think of young people coming up in this age of COVID, and I only got my mobile in 2018. I'm totally not wedded to these things. I still will only read a paper book. I don't like any of this stuff. You and I text, but we need to talk as well.
Yes.
So what I would say to them is one of the medium is a message. And I've seen that one of the most destructive things to relationships, whether your friendships, we escape into the texting and we hide behind it, and I do it myself, but I'm onto myself. I know it. I know when I need to reach out, and I know the bad people who won't reach out.
Yeah.
So beware of the people who, whether it's young men dating or young women dating, beware of those people who will lock you into those mediums or media without giving you their voice, their passion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something. Does that make sense to you?
Yep, 100%.
Because we're so locked into our gadgets. And one of the joys I've had is going down as a runner and going to the community field. And it was always, it was me looking up to the osprey's nest. And the osprey comes every year, and I have the absolute joy of seeing the fledglings fly their first flight and all that. And always the women were typing, double chin going, the typing on the mobile, the kids being swung with the one hand and then back to the double chin and the mobile. I don't like the mobile. He'll give me a double chin. I want to keep my neckline, But anyhow, now I go down there and everyone is playing. And everyone has abandoned because of COVID.
Oh, okay.
There's some sort of dynamic going. People are playing with one another and talking, and there's some positive human aspect to what's happening. People are reaching out and wanting to, just to drop the gadgets, because it locks you. It changes your brain. It changes how you think. I almost liken it to porn. Not that I'm very against porn. And people ask me as a libertarian, how can you? Because people don't understand the difference between fully supporting it legally and condemning it morally, culturally, and in any other way. People don't understand that. How can a libertarian condemn porn? I actually am really down with the working girls, because a lot of them have to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
Working girls.
Right.
But pornography is a prostitute who is an exhibitionist. And that to me is evil.
One of the worst misunderstandings that people have of libertarianism, and this is a lot of the fault of mainstream libertarians, is that because you don't want something to be illegal, it means that you think it's amazing.
Exactly.
In other words, like you just said, we don't want prostitution to be illegal, but it doesn't mean that I want to go see a prostitute after we get off this call. And same thing with heroin and drugs of any sort. It doesn't mean we're celebrating the culture that they exist. It just means you don't want someone in a cage because they did it.
Yeah, and I also want to take license with the fact that I can be nuanced about cultural issues, because I'm a paleo-libertarian and I refuse to be defined by simplistic definitions of that. It's a complicated way of being. And I do want to say that I do respect working girls. Some of them have to do it. But to me, pornography, the sacred act that is becomes an act of exhibition is very, very destructive and ugly. And I don't like these people. I really don't respect them. And so I do like to make those distinctions, even though I fully support their right to do this, and it should be, what they do.
Yeah.
So to me, the gadget is almost as addictive as that kind of thing. I've read that people are very addictive to, those sort of stimuli, the pornographic.
Yep.
The gadget is almost a pornographic stimuli.
Yes, no doubt.
Where you can get the immediacy of, you see the name pop up, you see the thing you want to hear,
Yep.
and you don't have to connect.
Yeah.
And the human voice, you and I are connecting. We were great on text and on email, but we're connecting now, right?
Yes.
We're connecting as human beings.
Yep.
So I would like to say to young people, don't lock yourself into that obscene pornographic, how would one say, medium.
Yeah. Yep.
As Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message. And in this case, the message is very bad.
Yes.
Use it for emergencies, for connecting, for setting up what we've just done, this wonderful get-together. And the other thing I want to say, and that's to do with the tech, because deep tech is huge. It's huge now. It's very hard for young people, and I'm sure your audience is quite young, to avoid that very enticing job. It pays wonderfully. You can work from home, which is a good thing. That's a good thing with COVID, because you don't have to undergo the human resources propagandizing. You don't have to undergo that. But you do have to do that online, and you do have to show your mettle. So if you have the talent, and not everyone, if you have super talent, if you are, a lot of our people, libertarians are highly intelligent, because a lot of reasoning is you're applying abstract axioms to real life.
Right.
And that does need a level of abstraction. Very smart people, if you can work as a contractor, as someone who's been enmeshed in tech for 20 years and has seen how it destroys families and a lot more, it's the way they operate. I'm not going to say that it's intentional, that I don't believe in conspiracy. It's reflexive. It's more conducive to breaking the human being down. These people, let's say, for instance, you'll see articles in very zhuzh, Tony magazines, like libertarian magazines, about, how fun it is to offer drinks at work. Our people, people get it's very free, and you can have order your wines there, and you can have, you can drink, etc., with the people there. And the whole point is very libertine and very progressive, and they are right in the sense that these people are so bright that a little bit of brain pruning that is caused by alcoholism is not going to hurt the project and the bottom line. These people are bright enough to overcome that. But what they do is they just move the person out of the family and into the corporate culture.
Yeah.
And what you have is wives, families waiting at home, and this is how they draw people in, and they draw them with their bonus structure, and how they break them down with critical race and proud men who can't mention their faith, especially if you are white. So if you have gifts to go it alone as a contractor, try and be a contractor, an independent contractor.
Okay.
That's my advice to young people in the tech, in deep tech.
Let's talk about your books real quick, too. We got to list them off, and because after this interview, they might be saying, well, where do I read her at? And can you tell them real quick about the books you've written?
Well, I'm sure by now, I know on the movement's dirty little secret, but I think they know my website, surely, ilanamercer.com. It's a fun website. All my columns are archived there, and my books are there, and certainly you've been pushing me to write the next one, and I hope I can.
Yes.
And you'll be the first to know when it's done. Books are all there, but please, if you could put out those social media addresses, I'd really appreciate that. So, weekly column, and they can sign on to my, I've given you all those links.
Yep.
They can sign on to my newsletter, and please just contact me on Twitter. Follow me and contact me. I always reply, and I will add you to my weekly columns. newsletter.
Excellent.
And anytime they want to just connect and say hi, I never fail to answer.
That is so cool. All of these links that you gave me for my audience listening right now, I will link in the show notes page to this episode, all of Ilana Mercer's media, basically. Everything you need to find, I will link to it in the show notes page.
Wonderful, Buck.
Yes, wonderful, Ilana. Thank you so much for being here on Death to Tyrants.
And you made it fun. You made it fun.
We made it fun. We made it fun.
Yeah, we did it. Yeah, it was great.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that great chat with Ilana Mercer. I told you you would like her, and I know you did. So obviously, all of her stuff really can just be found at ilanamercer.com, but I will link to several things aside from just that webpage in the show notes page for this episode. And I do want to tell you, she will respond to everyone that writes her, whether it's on Twitter or via her website, all of that. She's very friendly and loves corresponding with people. So give her a shout. Tell her you heard her on Death to Tyrants. And I promise you, we will definitely be doing some more shows, some more episodes and stuff in the future. And as for this show, you already know, death2tyrantspodcast.com is where you find all of my stuff, all of my links. And we got some very good shows coming up here basically to the end of the year. And then at that point, there's some big changes happening in this show, and I mean for the good. Some big stuff coming your way from this show. I will tell you more as time goes on. Until then, you guys have a great week.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Death to Tyrants podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.